Hello, this is Kris Nelson for evolvedconsciousness.org. I'll be reading the etymological breakdown entitled Bearing Good and Evil, published on the 22nd of November 2014. This has to do with an inquiry into the three words compassion, sympathy, and empathy. I wanted to look into them and once and for all clear up why they all have the same root, passion, pathy, and then how they're different or how they're the same. So that was my goal going into this, and I uncovered more. And I uncovered something related to a previous article that I had done of analogy, balance, and in between, which there is an audio and video up for that. And it has to do with bearing. So if you go look at that post first, you'll already have an understanding of where I'm going in this one, as indicated by the title, Bearing Good and Evil. To begin, words can have dual meanings when looking at them in relation to truth or falsity, good or evil, etc. By associating words in relation to truth and good in one perspective, and then associating the word with falsity and evil in another perspective, the several meanings in etymological root relations and derivations can be more clearly understood. Compassion is calm together, and passion is suffering, endure, or hurt. Sympathy is sim, which is the same thing as calm, together, and pathy is suffering and endure. More related also to feeling and emotion than passion. A passion is more suffering and enduring a hurt, and a pathy is also a suffering and enduring, but it has also an aspect of feeling and emotion. Empathy, M is in, and then we have suffering from pathy and endure from pathy, and as well feeling and emotion since they're from pathy. Later on we'll see that pathy comes from passion or passion from pathy, I forget, but we'll see that. So they're all essentially the same in root meaning, but when the words got developed, so pathy and passion have different connotations even though they have the same root. Why passions suffer, endure, and hurt? Isn't passion good? Right? When you have a passion for something, don't you think it's good? Aren't empathy and sympathy good as well? What is etymology capable of telling us? Why is it telling us suffer, endure, and hurt? Why are these words saying these things? That sympathy was good, and compassion was good, and empathy was good things. Well, they are good, but they're there for us to feel the evil that others feel the suffering others feel brought on by evil and falsity and immorality, to endure what they are enduring. And if you can't have compassion and sympathy and empathy, if you can't put yourself in other people's shoes, if you can't understand the pain, then you have a deadened heart, deadened care, deadened compassion, deadened empathy, deadened conscience, and probably a deadened morality. Because if you can't feel reality, the harm that is done, you can't transpose yourself and imagine what that is. Of course, you're not going to feel exactly what it is, but you're going to be able to understand the suffering that someone is going through or another being is going through, because you can put yourself in their place. So suffer is to carry up or under, bear, undergo, or endure. And then we get to endure. Endure is firm, solid, steadfast. From durare, and that's from Proto-Indo-European deru, and that means true. And that's the root for true. True comes from deru and durare, and in French, so you can understand why this is endure, and because true is related to hard and solid, and durare in French, dur is hard. So you can see the Latin languages again, how they relate. So endure is in suffering, something. I'll explain it later. I'm not going to get into it before I get to it. Alright. Hurt. To injure, wound, stumble or stumble into, bump into, charge against, rush, crush, rush or crash into, knock things together. And it's from, you can see where these meanings come from when you look at the Old French heurter, which is to ram, strike, and collide. So it's ram, strike, and collide. So when you think of something ramming into something, striking into something, colliding into something, it probably injures and wounds something if it can feel or receive impressions. If you ram, strike, or collide a rock and it shatters, well, it didn't get injured or wounded or whatever, but there was a charge against, it was rushed, it was crashed into, two things knocked together. Hurt requires a force. So in order to ram, strike, and collide, for two things to hit, a force needs to be exerted in order for this effect to be produced. Hurt is rooted in meaning with ram, strike, and collide. To ram into something, to strike something, to collide into something requires a force. One thing goes towards another. We have the expression, I am hurting for it, as in you are deeply yearning it, seeking it, desire it. That is to say, you care for it. And that is to say, a passion for it. So you can see, now we're starting to relate things. Why was compassion, why did it have suffer, endure, and hurt? Well, we already have other aspects of our language and phrases. You're hurting for it. You're yearning for it. You're desiring it. You care for it. You have a passion for it. So we can see how it relates in that way. Not in the sense of suffering and enduring and hurt and all those methods of ramming and striking, but if you're hurting for it, you also have the force. So you're ramming towards, you're striking towards, you're going to collide towards something, you're using a force to go towards something, so you're hurting for it, you desire it, seek it, yearn it, care for it, you have a passion for it. So that's where we have the good connotation of passion, as opposed to compassion, sympathy, and empathy, which are negative aspects of suffering and enduring, of usually negative things when we think of suffering. So it has a negative aspect, but also has a positive aspect, as we can see. You have a passion for something, you hurt for it, you care for it, desire, seek, yearn. We can see how even our modern language has retained some of the meaning behind passion and hurt. So into the modern language, we see hurting for it, passion, and that's the good side, the positive side. But even in the negative side of compassion, sympathy, and empathy, related to suffering, enduring, and hurting, you can look at it as a positive way as well, because you need to feel those things that other people are feeling in order to get onto the same page and fight evil. Because if other people are experiencing evil, immorality, wrong, and falsity, and they're suffering, and they're enduring it, and there's nothing changing, well, if it's not happening to you, and you can't feel with them, if you can't, as one being suffers, we all suffer, if you can't feel the suffering for another being, then you're not going to do anything about it. So you're not going to do anything to stop evil. You're not going to do anything to stop and stand up for truth, to stop evil, stop falsity, stop immorality, stop the wrong, and stand up for truth and morality instead. If you can't feel what the other person's going through, then you're not going to care what's happening. So you have a passion to help them. You care to help them. You have a desire to help them. You seek helping them. You yearn to help them. See, there's dual aspects to a lot of words. So hurting doesn't have to be a negative. The passion and suffering doesn't have to be a negative, but it often involves a negative in order to bring you towards the positive. That's why you have to have the knowledge of good and evil to create good. If you're ignorant of evil, then you'll likely be living in evil, because you won't know what the evil is that you're possibly or not possibly living, just as the movie The Giver demonstrates. You can be conditioned into accepting falsity as truth, wrong as right, and evil as good. So we can see how the modern language has retained some of the meaning behind passion and hurt. Hurt has been related to a driving force in our colloquial language. So in our modern language, in certain areas and idioms, we have, I am hurting for it. So that's why it's a driving force. because of care and desire. That's our driving force, the so-called, quote, spiritual aspect. The spirit in which we do things is what we care for and desire for and have a passion for to do. That's the, quote, spirit in which we do things, and that's why the, quote, heart and the emotions and care, because care is and desire are associated with emotions as they are an internal aspect. And so when you feel things, you feel compassion, empathy, sympathy, and you feel the suffering and you endure it, and you feel the hurt. Well, that hurt can bring you to hurt for something, to relieve that hurt, to desire and care to relieve that suffering for all, so that no one suffers, and then we can actually become free. Everything can be right. So we have, it hurts the, quote, heart, so you endure it. Your, quote, heart was made hard to endure the hurt, endure the force of impact, otherwise it would, quote, break. So when we go back to endure, when I was talking about durare and deru, and true, and how that's hard, firm, solid, steadfast, well, if it hurts your heart, then you have to endure it. Because if you're not enduring it, if you don't harden your heart to sustain the force of that impact, of that evil, immorality, wrong, falsity being perpetuated against another who can suffer, then you're going to feel their suffering and it's going to break you inside because you're too weak. You have to make your heart hard. You have to make your heart hard to endure the hurt. You have to endure the force of impact, or else it breaks. To harden yourself inside from an impacting force, to endure, relates to hurt. So you harden yourself inside. That's why people who've been hurt over and over, well, they get to an extreme imbalance in hardening, and then they cut themselves off from feeling anything, and they don't have emotions because they've been hurt over and over and over. And it's just, so they've just repeatedly hardened their heart over and over and over in order to endure it. And then at a certain point, I guess it stays calcified in hardness, and then they just lack the, quote, heart aspects of consciousness, which would be the emotions, and they don't have the ability to feel them as well or to express them as well because they've hardened their heart from trauma and suffering that they've endured, because they endured it first and they hardened their heart to sustain it and not break and to survive. But each time it hardens it and hardens it and hardens it, and then you have a heart like a rock and a cold heart. All these metaphors, it all relates to this. All relates to the suffering and enduring the suffering and the hurt. This meaning relates to the suffering we are impacted with from others in the compassion and sim or empathy. It can hurt and we endure. Because you can have psychological, emotional, so psycho-emotive, psycho-affective damage through a shattering. So if you don't harden your heart in certain cases and you don't withstand it and endure it, well, the force of the impact of evil can break your heart and create a split or dissociation from reality. And I guess this relates to trauma-based mind control as well. As you get broken, this is how also you can break animals, because they have free will. So people who engage in horses or whatever, they have to break the will of horse, because a horse is a free animal in the wild, and you have to break the will of animals in order to make them your slaves. So you torture them, you make them suffer, you give them pain, you hurt them, and then you break their will, because after a certain time, if your heart can't take it, if it's not endured, it breaks and shatters, and that causes a psychological break as well, because your aspects of consciousness are your thoughts and emotions. So the heart is symbolic. It's not the physical heart, it's a symbolic heart, as I've explained in other work, related to emotions, that aspect of consciousness. So since it's all part of consciousness, what affects your quote heart and your emotions, your ability to feel, will affect your consciousness and psychology. So that's why I'm calling it a psycho-emotional or psycho-affective break. And that's where trauma-based mind control is. That's what happens to animals. All animals that are trained, enslaved, and tortured into obeying another is just like what we can do to other humans and have human animals obey other human animals. It's not just other animals. It might be easier to break the other animals because we have more free will in terms of our expressive capacities of consciousness and the free will to create. We have more creative ability, hence our capacity to express free will is also greater. We're a higher order consciousness with more free will. So they may be easier to break in trauma-based programming and conditioning into slavery, but humans can be done the same thing. So that's mind control, MK Ultra, trauma to break the heart in order to break the spirit. So you remember how your care was the spirit in which you do things, and that's related to your emotions and quote heart. So when you break the heart, you break quote the spirit in which you do things. So you don't have your free will. So your spirit has been broken, which is your free will from the care. So you don't have a drive to do what you want to do. Now you're broken. You become a husk, a programmed husk, and you do what the master says. Because your spirit, your heart's been broken. Your quote heart's been broken. So your quote spirit has been broken, and your quote will has been broken. Because the care is the motivation, the will actualizes the motivation from care. So you have your care and then your will actualizes into an action. So it goes from care, the will actualizes the care into an action. So that's an additional explanation that's not in the article, which is pretty in-depth. I like that, and I should have, I don't think I'll type it in, but it's a good information. People should listen to my audios instead of reading just the text, because my audios have a lot more information than simply the text that I have previously written, because I elaborate when I do the audio. Our passion, what we quote hurt for, is what we care to do, a driving and motivating force to get movement initiated. That causes the movement from one thing towards another. So one thing towards another. Remember hurt? Ramming, collision, one thing towards another. So eventually movement of one thing towards another leads to a collision, a striking of one to another, a ramming into it. So even when you attain your desire, when you attain what you're striving for and seeking, well, you can say that you grasp it in your hand, right? Once you gain something, once you grasp an aspect of truth and morality, well, you've attained it. It's like you're holding it in your hand. Well, that's a collision. You didn't have it in your hand, then you reached for it, you collided with it, and then you grasped it. That is if collision, striking of one another, or ramming into it, that is if the destination is reached, if it is ever reachable. So what I'm saying is, that's what I'm talking about here, about truth. Yeah, so if your destination is reached, so when you're striving for something and you grasp truth, if you can grasp it, then you can grasp it and you reached it. But if you can't reach the destination, let's say perfection, well, you can never reach perfection, so you'll never collide with perfection, you'll never grasp perfection, but you can move towards it, you can head for that destination, but maybe you'll never reach it. So some things are never reachable even though we desire and care for them and strive towards it, and we reach aspects of it, so we can grasp aspects of perfection, but never the totality of perfection. So that is if the destination is reached, if it is ever reachable. Maybe in some cases it is simply a destination for the journey, which is what perfection is. It's a destination for the journey. You put that ends in goal, but you're never going to reach it, but that doesn't matter because the journey is about the means. The means are the ends. So your ends of perfection is achieved through your means of striving for perfection, which is to align with truth and morality. So in your means of progressively grasping and embodying aspects of truth and morality, truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, then you're progressively going towards that destination as a means, even though you may never reach it. But reaching the goal isn't the ultimate thing that you should focus on. It's the means, which are truth and morality, and possibly ever reaching the goal. You don't know if you'll ever reach the goal of perfection. I personally think it's not possible. It's an absolute state. There's only relative perfection within limits. So within the limits of the human body, there might be a perfected state where something else would happen afterwards. Who knows? So maybe in some cases it is simply a destination for the journey, and we will never arrive there fully ourselves because it is impossible to achieve in totality, such as truth. You can strive for truth, but you'll never reach it in totality. You can strive for perfection, but you'll never reach it in totality. So when you strive for perfection, you work to purify yourself in alignment with truth and morality. This is alchemy. You purify, transmute, sublimate, heal, grow, change, and evolve. That's the purpose of alchemy. So it's not about, you do have the end in mind, but you're working on the means. And that's where you're always working, is on the journey and the means, because the means are the end. So people who want to justify ends with means, and they want to justify the end of good with the means of evil, they don't understand how it works. You won't create the end result of good by using evil. That doesn't mean you can't use force to put an end to violence. People are confused on that issue. So, I'll read it again. Maybe in some cases it is simply a destination for the journey, and we will never arrive there fully ourselves because it is impossible to achieve in totality, such as truth, but it doesn't stop us from evolving our consciousness in search and attainment of some aspects of truth, some aspects of morality, some aspects of love, of good, of natural law, of the true self, which is the higher self, which is representative of the higher will that seeks itself truth and morality, or has created itself the law of morality. And that's what we have to aspire towards, that higher will of our higher self and true self. Because if it's our higher self, then that's the true self, and it's all one thing. One thing. Truth is one way. Truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, God, source, spirit, all one, singularity. Well, it's all one thing. It's one way. It's one thing. People have a hard time grasping this when I make these associations. They hear what I say, but they're not making the connections. I've made the connections, and I've talked about it ever since, at least since the higher self and lower self article, which I did in the beginning of 2014 or at the end of 2013. I think it was at the end of 2013, I'm not sure. So I've been uncovering more aspects of that truth, of that oneness. And the true self is that oneness. These are all related aspects. It's not an individual identity like we have here, and like a rock is, and a cup is, and a pencil is not a pen, and a pencil is not an eraser. That's identity. One thing is one thing, and it's not another. Anyways, I'll get into that in the future when I do natural moral law. But that's just to explain that the thing that we're striving for, truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, source, God, all, spirit, singularity, etc. That's not something we can ever reach ourselves because we are an individuated unit of consciousness. We don't ever reach that. We strive for it from our birth to our death in order to improve ourselves so that we can affect change in reality and help influence others in order for karmic aggregate result. Again, karma is about everything we do and the people who lived before us, what they do, and the people who lived before them and what they did, and everything compounds into the manifested reality we now have. It's all cause and effect. That's why karma is cause and effect. Karma has nothing to do with reincarnation. Karma and reincarnation has to do with the one, that one energy divides itself into an energy, into different parts of energy, and then once that energy reaches the physical reality as a manifested form in a complex structural unit of a body, then that energy source that's a part of the one, well, that part, you see, the whole is not simply a sum of its parts. So the parts aren't simply, you can't just correlate parts with the whole and say, well, the whole has this, so therefore the parts have it. No, that's not the way it works. So the parts, if you're going to say it's all anthropomorphization and projection, but if you want to believe God has an identity based on the Bible and all these other stories, which I don't, it's not an identity like we have in the physical form, because that's where identity, ego, personality, identity, how the identity of someone, how we're all unique. Well, God is the one, and then when the one energy is fractured into parts of energy, well, that parts of energy isn't the one. The one is the one. The parts are not the one. People don't understand the difference between the parts and the whole in systems thinking. So when the part is actualized into a physical body vehicle, it develops its own unique individuality because it's born at a particular time and at a particular place, and no one else is born at that particular time and particular place, so automatically you have a different set of causal effect conditions which will create a different human. But on top of that, the environment is different. There's different parents, there's different societies, there's different experiences. No one has the same experience. No one has the same upbringing. All of that creates the ego personality identity construct of the individuated unit of consciousness as it manifests in reality. Once it dies, there is no more identity, because it wasn't an identity to begin with. It was just a part of a whole energy unit. So, anyways, I'll continue with the article. That's enough of that rant. I have spoken about bearing what we carry in relation to relate, refer, correspond, etc. And that's the article on analogy, balance, and in between. If you carry something forever, you want it to be something good, not evil. So you can suffer and bear and carry, because suffer, again, if we look, is to carry up or under, to bear, undergo, endure. So you can suffer. Usually our connotation of suffer is a negative, and hurt is of a negative, which is natural. Hurt is usually a negative, but I've shown how colloquially and then it's developed into a relation with a passion and care and desire and seeking. But if you carry something forever, you want it to be something good, not evil. So you can suffer something good. It's a good kind of suffering. You can endure something good. That's very easy to endure and suffer something good. You can carry up something good without problem. It's because it's light. You know, if you look at my unity is based in morality graph, which I did an audio of yesterday or the day before, well, you can see how when you have truth and morality on the positive right side, the right hand doing right, and then if you look at other work I've done, you have the right hand of God and the left hand of God, which is morality versus immorality, right versus wrong. So on the left side of that graph, you have falsity and immorality rather than truth and morality that's on the right. So when you're going upwards on truth and morality, you go up there, you're going to also go up in freedom, peace, and unity. And that's how you obtain unity and freedom and peace. It all develops organically through alignment with truth and morality. But also, when you align with truth and morality, that's light, as represented by the air element, the air in the sky. The sky is blue, the sky, air, the sun is in the sky, the sun is in the air, the sun is light, the light is light, and also light, the air is light, but the sun is light. You see how the two words mix? It's all symbolic of aspects of good. So something good, when you carry it and you bear it, well, it's light. There's no problem carrying and bearing something good. There's no problem at all. We all have no problem with that, and that's all what we all seek to bear and carry. That's what I want to seek and bear. I do not want to carry around and endure evil. I don't want to perpetuate evil. I want to send evil. I want to cast evil out of me and send it away. But if other people are suffering, then I'm going to still be enduring the evil, and I'm still going to be suffering the evil. So that's why, as one being suffers, we all suffer, because we have a responsibility to truth and morality to end evil. And then when we end evil, well, that suffering we're enduring, the compassion, the sympathy, and the empathy we have for other beings, and the pain they're going through the evil immorality that other humans or that we ourselves perpetuate through the aggregate karmic system of involvement in the overall way of life we perpetuate. Well, so that's the point of enduring and bearing good, is that's what we all want to do. That's where we want to get to. But so long as another being suffers, we also suffer. Is it starting to make sense, that spiritual axiom that Mark Passio introduced? I've never heard it before. Mark Passio introduced it, but so long as one being suffers, we all suffer. You understand? That if you have a developed heart center, if you have developed care, if you have developed compassion, empathy, conscience, and morality, you will feel the pain that others suffer. And as a result, you will undergo the burden of bearing and carrying, which is what suffer and endure is about, that evil that other people are going through. You're going to feel it, and you're going to want to care and desire and have the passion and hurt to remove that evil from existence. So you're going to want to alleviate the suffering of others, and it will remove suffering in the world, and then you won't feel suffering. You won't be enduring the suffering, and then all that's going to be left is enduring the good. You are not going to be enduring the evil that is perpetuated against others or ourselves, because we're going to remove it. So that's where I mentioned it in another audio, I think the previous one on family and slavery, or on the other one on abracadabra, that we are one in this way through the aggregate karma and the recognition of the true self, which is the higher self, which is the one, all, God, spirit, etc., the source energy from which consciousness can be expressed, because it has that source energy. Well, this is all conceptual and speculative anyway, so don't take me as this is 100% truth. This is just conceptual understandings of where good and why there's good, and how we understand good is because it's an actual aspect of being, a transcendental being. And that's why you get to transcendental, you get to God and spirit and all that, because that's transcendental. It's not based in this reality. But those aspects of transcendental being we can see manifested through the aspects of physical being, which are here, and they're most visibly manifested through, or not manifested through, free will agents who can act in service of good or act in evil. And then if you act in the service of good, you can remove the evil in order to maximize the good, which would be to actualize and realize aspects of the transcendental being, which is truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, God, source, spirit, all one, singularity, etc. It's actualizing the purity of that first cause, unmovable mover, prime mover. But it's still speculative. It's just the model that I've derived through logic, based in reality, and how I can tie things back to reality. So there's identity of us, and that's it. Other things in other realms may have identities, but we exist here. We are not other entities. We are at a higher position than other entities. Other entities are in a lower form of living than we are. We have creative capacities to evolve. So that's all speculative too, the other entities and the jinn and the archons and all this stuff, but they are lower beings, even though they don't have physicality. So don't think of physical material as being lower just because they're not embodied. You think that they're higher, but they're actually lower because they can't embody. Because this is Richard Wetherill had posited this idea as well, that we are here to improve the spiritual dimension that is so porous and diseased. The other alleged entities. We're here to create in good and right in order to actualize aspects of the transcendental being that these other beings, these other alleged beings and entities in other realms, they do not have. So they are lower beings, they lack this, if they exist, or whatever. It's all speculative. Anyways, it's a model to make sense of different aspects of reality that we can be exposed to, and we can't really verify all of these things, but it's conceptual, and there is a logical base, and the more you tie it back down to reality through the manifestations of reality that are capable of manifesting transcendental being, and the more aspects, more connections will be made that validate the model. So when people talk about karma of past lives, and that your reason you're here and what you have and blah 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 is because of the past life, well, I call that bullshit. I also call reincarnation bullshit. I call soul identities bullshit, because they don't make sense, because they were invented at a time. Karma, where was it made? Where was it used? In the caste system, right? I'm not saying that's originally where it came from, that concept or the word, but that's where we get the most common understanding of it now, is from going through the changes of the caste system. That's where it comes out, where it's a validation for past lives because you had the past life. So that's why people validate a soul identity, because it's validated in, oh, well, I have an identity here, so where does my identity come from? Well, it's got to come from somewhere else, because they don't understand the aspect of how we're conditioned, how our identity comes from conditioning in this reality. It doesn't come from anywhere else. It comes from this reality. We are conditioned into this reality, and in that conditioning of this reality, we form an identity. Without reality, there is no identity to be formed. In the other realms, in the other realities, if those entities exist, then they have their own aspects of being, their own personalities and identities. Well, that's them. They are not. They are their own manifestation from a division of the all, albeit corrupted, and we are our own manifestation in the all, in our own realm, in our own universe, in our own reality that operates differently from theirs. We have physical beings, bodies, and we manifest and we have an identity. So karma is about all of us acting together in cause and effect to create the world we have. And it's gone back for thousands of years. That's our karma, is fixing things. It's not because you had a past life that had a specific identity attached to a soul identity that reincarnated as your identity now, and that's where your aspects of your identity come from. No. The spark of the flame, the spark isn't the flame. So the spark, you want to believe it has an identity? Fine. But in order to validate that it has an identity, it would have to actually be expressive in some way that you could demonstrate that there is an identity at that individuated energy consciousness level. So there's us here, and then you posit that there is a soul level with its own identity. I don't deny the word soul and that it represents an individuated unit of consciousness, but the additional aspect of its own identity, that I do deny, because it does not make sense. It's anthropomorphization in order to provide connected pieces for unanswered questions, which are, well, where does my identity come from? Why are we all different? Why are we not the same? Well, I just explained in previous audios and in this one. I'm not sure if I did it in this one, because I do audio after audio after audio, and I'm not sure exactly where I say things sometimes. So I said it today in the other audios on Abracadabra, I believe. How it's all from impositions and influences in our environment, the nurture, and we have a nature aspect. Yes, the nature aspect is the true self. So if we didn't have any impositions and influences and conditioning, what would theoretically naturally manifest would be the true self, which would be aspects of. So in the physicality, the embodiment of the true self would manifest as aspects of, not the totality of the true self, the totality of the higher self, the totality of the higher will. You can never be the totality, but aspects of, parts. So you can look, the human nature is according to our true nature, which is the true self, higher self, etc. Truth, love, good, right. So you can actualize aspects of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. And that is our human nature. It's the nature of everything. It's just that we, as the most higher order biological vehicle unit to host the individuated energy of consciousness, can allow the expressive potential of that true self to feed back into the physical manifestation. And that's why the concept is of to create in truth, love, good, right, morality is to create as your true self, because it's your true nature to do good and not evil, to live morally and not immorally, to express truth and not falsity. Anyways, that was another elaboration based on my previous article, on my previous audio where I went off a tangent on in the abracadabra audio. So here I've gone off on another tangent because we were talking about, I talked about how good and not evil, how we're trying to carry good and not evil because we're trying to get back to actualizing, realizing, and individuating ourselves in the physical reality, which is the only place it can be individuated. You can, an individual just means not further divisible. So a cup is not further divisible, it's the cup. Well, sure, you can break it, but that's not what it means in metaphysics. The individual is not further divisible. That's what in is not or opposite of, and divisible, divide. So it's not divided. You can't divide the cup, you can't divide the pencil, you can't divide ourselves. We're built into a unit. The cat's built into a unit, the monitor is built into a unit. Everything's built into a unit. It's an individual thing. And it can't be further broken. So that's why the soul, or the word soul, or word spirit, to attribute to an individuated energy of consciousness, if we accept the concept of the one consciousness, so it would be an individuation of that one. So it's not the one, but it's an individual because it's not further dividable. So there was a division from the one which can be divided, and then it divided into many little parts. So you can have the aspect of the one divided and created all of reality and everything is consciousness, or you can think of it as just as free will consciousness, or both together. And the only way free will is expressed through the creation of the all, being all consciousness that created everything, all the subatomic particles and the atoms and everything is all based in consciousness. But the only way for the all true self, higher self, to be expressed as the higher will, free will, is for a certain constructed physical body vehicle to be able to manifest that expression of consciousness of free will. So you need the free will aspect of consciousness in order for the material base consciousness programming, in order for that programming to evolve more. So you have the programming from all consciousness, the subatomic particles, and the greater complexity, greater coordination, and components that get built upon. And you get greater complexity, you have emergent properties, that's why the parts, and they create a whole. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's what always happens. The parts each have their thing, but the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So you have cells and whatever in our bodies, but we are obviously greater than the sum of our parts by orders of magnitude. Well, the same thing when you go in reverse. The parts are not reflections of the whole. The cell is not a reflection of us. All of this nonsense, holographic, fractal, graphic, fractalo, whatever, belief that it's all as above, so below, and blind belief in correspondence that, oh yeah, the universe is within us. No, we can make analogies to how atoms operate like the old atomic model operates like the solar system model and things like that. But they're just analogies in order to create correspondences and imagery to correlate things, to help provide a correspondence of understanding. But it's not literal hologram or a literal fractal. It's the image of a hologram. The way a hologram operates is holographic, and the way a fractal operates is, you could say, fractographic or whatever. So these aspects, the ik is characteristic of a hologram, which is self-similarity. So there are aspects of reality that are self-similar, but that does not allow blind correspondence and blind application of self-similarity and this holographic principle and fractal principle. It's not to be applied blindly, and it's not literal. So even when you go from the whole and you have the parts, so you go from the one consciousness to the part consciousness, you still don't have the aspects of the whole in the parts. It's not the same thing. And then when that part manifests in physicality as per the will of creator, of creation, then that aspect of creation can potentially actualize aspects of the whole, but not the whole itself, only aspects of the whole. And the aspects of the whole I'm talking about are the transcendental aspects of being that we can verify in our reality as manifested already by some things, by our own actions, and that would be the good. Truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. These are the transcendental aspects of being that we can reach for and grasp and embody ourselves as a manifested individual unit of consciousness with our own identities here in physicality. The other aspects don't have identities. They don't have a name. They don't have a face. They don't have a personality. It's not an identity. It's an individual because it's not further dividable. So the one source divided and created all of existence conceptually, we can envision or imagine to try to give meaning to how things happened as a causal relation. So it divided, and through that division there's multiplication. The more pieces you divide, the more there are, so you multiply. You divide one in half, well, you have two parts. So when you divide, you get more. Dividing, you get multiplication. So it divides itself into, theoretically, a gazillion parts and a trillion, an infinite number of parts or whatever, and it still has part of itself because it's infinite. Anyways, however that works, that's all conceptual, whatever. None of this can be proved anyways. It's all conceptual. It's just whatever makes the most sense in the model. So it individuates, it creates the universe, and then there's still individuated parts, such as what we refer to as the soul unit, which is just an individuated part of the all. It's not the all. It's not its own identity. It's referred to as the soul because it's a part of the spirit. It's an individuated part. And then that soul itself can't perfect itself. It's not an entity. It doesn't have an identity. It doesn't have a personality. It doesn't have its own desires and wills. It's just a unit of energy that goes into physicality, just like everything else in physicality went into physicality, right? So the rocks and everything, the subatomic particles, if we conceptually view this as coming from the one consciousness, and it divided itself and created different energy fields and things like this. And so one aspect of that is, well, the soul, the energy force that comes into the body or develops in the body as it grows in complexity. So the rocks have little complexity. There either is no consciousness in it, or there's no consciousness to develop in order to express consciousness expressions or free will. And then you get the plants, and then you get the animals. Well, animals, they can express it. They have free will. They can go where they want. They can do what they want, move around. They have their own actions. Some of them have reduced actions and more of a collective hive mind, like plants would, which is where they're ruled more by the queen hive mind, the collective. So animals still have this aspect of the lower order aspects of the consciousness manifesting in the physical, where you have rocks that don't have any aspects of I lost my train of thought. Well, the rock, and then the plant, and then you have animals with more degrees of expressive capabilities and free will, and less of a programmed deterministic nature from nature and from the law that has boundaries, limits, and is programmed. So rocks are part of nature, plants are part of nature, and they can communicate through chemicals and interact, but just as programs in a computer could communicate and interact through various stimulus from causal forces which appear random and free will forces which are random in themselves. And when they affect, and then there's chemical signals, but this can all be done through a collective hive mind consciousness programming aspect. And the least programmed, well, the most programmed would be ones that can't send chemicals or anything anywhere. So what is not living. So you have so rocks and minerals and whatever, but you have the 6 kingdoms of life. You have the bacteria, and you have fungi, and you have other things, and then there's plants and animals. Well, those are different expressive capabilities of consciousness and the collective consciousness. Do they have their own identities? Do they have their own personalities? No, because they don't have the other 5 kingdoms, apart from animals, don't have the physical body vehicle necessary in order for free will to become potentialized in that body vehicle, so that consciousness can be expressed. So consciousness correlates with free will. The other 5 kingdoms of life do not have higher order consciousness. It starts in animals. Before that, it's more collective consciousness, programmed, boundaries and limits. They don't have free will. It's a collective. And then we see that transposed into the lower animals of the higher order classes of life, which are animals. But within that higher order class of life of animals, there's still lower order consciousness and higher order consciousness. So the animals have less, and then we have the most expressive capabilities of consciousness and the more free will than the lower order animals. Okay, that was enough of a tangent. Sorry there about that. It's just when I'm getting into good and evil, I feel I'm obligated to explain more detail on the good and where the good comes from, and why we feel it comes from a transcendental aspect of being, why we think this, why we conceptualize this, because it's manifested through us, but since it's if we can think of things existing and things not existing, like you'd have sight and being blind, well, that's a state that exists, but it's an absence of sight. Sight is what exists, and then you have the absence of sight. So you'd have good exists, and then the absence of good, truth, and the absence of truth. And all of the same thing. Go look at the dualistic conceptual framework. So this is a basic aspect of understanding reality, and through that understanding of reality, well, then you can say, what is the X, good, truth, love, right, etc.? Well, that is an aspect of being. Even though it's not a being in itself, here it's not a primary being as a human, or a cat companion, or the computer mouse or whatever. It's not an individuated part of reality. It's not a being, and then there's not it's not an attribute. It's not an accident of being, of the substance. It's there's qualities and attributes, so black or gray or round or soft or whatever, but good isn't in there because it's not accidental to a being, and it's more of a, that's why it's a transcendental aspect of being, because it's beyond any physical thing. Even if there was no physicality, that being would exist, but it wouldn't be able to manifest in physicality because there'd be nothing to manifest it in physicality, which is why you need free will and higher order consciousness in order to manifest that aspect of transcendental being into physicality. Otherwise, if there's no physicality, then there's no potential to manifest that into physicality. And you just have if you have physicality without the free will consciousness is emerging, then you just have physicality of programmed, limited boundaries. And you wouldn't, so you'd either program good in everything or you'd program not good, but you can't have it. You'd have to program it, it would be set, it wouldn't be changeable. In the free will consciousness is where it's changeable, because we have the capacity for great good or great evil. And that's why we are, that's where you need the knowledge of the tree of good and evil in order to choose the right path. Because we can do both paths. We can live dually and walk the checkerboard floor and doing good and evil, or we can choose the one way of the one truth, one love, one right, one morality, one natural law, one true self, one higher will, one God, the one all, the one spirit, the one singularity. It's all one. It's all the one way. So if you're going to make reality all as that aspect of the purity of the perfection of the one, well, it wouldn't even exist as reality. So to have things manifest in the capacities of that transcendental being or not, you need free will, because everything else is programmed. It's programmed the way it is, and it operates according to laws and boundaries. So we can choose to bear good, or we can't choose. You have to be willing to bear the good and evil, just like you have to be willing to learn the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. You have to learn the two, to choose the one. So you have to bear the good and the bad in life, even in what other people experience, so that you can choose the one over the other and choose to actualize that one, that force of good, in order to manifest that in the aggregate, so that everyone can collectively engage in the karma together to right the wrongs, right their past deeds, the wrongs of the past deeds, the wrongs of everyone that's come before us that have created the reality we've created. It's up to us. That's our responsibility in karma. As everyone was a manifestation, just as we are a manifestation of the true self, but in a physical being, as an individuated unit of consciousness, we still have free will, and we can choose to align ourselves with our true nature, our human nature, or we can continue to accept our corrupted, degenerated, diseased, and false human condition. So we have to bear what's in reality in order to affect reality properly. And when you bear what's in reality, the good and the evil, well, then you feel the good and the evil. And when you feel reality, then you can act on reality. So if you don't feel the evil, well, then you're not going to care to stop the evil. So that's why you have to have compassion, empathy, and sympathy for others in order to feel the suffering they're going to, in order to recognize the oneness. So that's why I got into this tangent, because I had to explain all this in order to relate it back to oneness and karma, the real karma and the real oneness. Is how we are, as one being suffers, we all suffer, because we are all one. We're all the one true self. As one being suffers, we all suffer. We're all the one true self in that higher respect, in that I awareness, the source energy. So it's not who we are here, but it's the conceptual source in causality. When you look at causal source, so eventually you get back to a prime mover, and then you can, from that induction into the prime mover as a logical possibility for an ultimate source, an ultimate cause, then you can deduce back from that universal that you've induced, and deduce back to reality and see how things match up. So that's why that one thing, the true self, the higher self, which has a higher will, well, that's the one thing, and we are not that one thing. We are individuated. We are ego, personality, identity constructs that get conditioned. So we can undo our conditioning and the human condition and the false condition and recondition ourselves into truth and morality. And that would be a conditioning into the true self, into that one force, the one truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. We'll never become that one, we'll never become the totality, but it's about embodying aspects, the means towards that end. If the end is ever reachable, like I said, there might be a limit to physical constructability for humans or other organisms, whereby an evolution takes place. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not just going to say that that's the truth. It's only a belief. It's only a possibility. We need to delineate between what is possible, what is probable, and what is actual, and other things that are likely unlikely and likely impossible, as opposed to possible, probable, or actual. As I mentioned in the other audio, just because you can think of something does not make it a true known. These are just inductions, imaginations, inventions in our mind. And that's what God is it is an invention. It is a conceptual derivation of thinking of a prime cause. Because if you think of causality, well, causality exists. There's always a cause for an effect. So for the universe to come into existence, in effect, there had to be a cause. And what's that in modern science? It's a singularity. And that's the one, all, whatever, spirit, God, everything I've been talking about. So that's the prime mover, the unmoved mover. It's just science, they'll make up their theory, they'll call it energy, the singularity, but they won't think of energy as other conceptual frameworks, which I'm talking about, which is God, all, one, source, spirit, singularity. It's the same thing, it's just using different words. But when they use the different words, then they get caught up into the religious doctrines that get developed after these conceptual frameworks are induced from reality, where you discover the concept of the universal, of the prime mover and first cause. And then from there, then it gets twisted into a religious context, and then the people who are anti-religious, they won't look at the concepts objectively and see how they relate to reality, and see how you can reinterpret things outside of the religious context and dogma, and see how it's actually talking about the same thing. But it's still a theory. The Big Bang is a theory, the singularity is a theory, and also God is a theory. It's all a concept in our minds in order to try to explain how we got here. And it does make sense when you look at it in the model that I'm talking about, as embodiments of aspects of the transcendental being, which aren't beings in themselves, but they do manifest through beings here, the physical beings that are capable of expressing consciousness with free will. They can express aspects of the transcendental being, whether they're ignorant of it or not, whether they know they're doing immorality or not, or morality or not, they're still expressing it because they have free will. So I'll get back to the article. That was a really, really big side tangent. So if you carry something forever, you want it to be something good, not evil. You want to carry the transcendental aspects of our human nature, the true self, the higher self. You want to carry that one thing, the one polarity, and not the opposite polarity. You want to strive towards that one polarity in greater degrees, levels, grades, graduations, and rebirths and reawakenings, and more afterlives, into being more and more alive each time you awaken and attain a great aspect of truth that brings you to another level in evolving consciousness. That's being more and more alive. I've explained this in a lot of my other audios. Like, go back and listen to all my audios, is what I have to say. Like I said in another one, I don't like to repeat, and I can hear things repeated, but it gets on my nerves to hear the same thing over and over. It's like, okay, I heard it, go on to other stuff, because time is limited and I want to use my time to get new information, not hear the same thing repeated over and over. So I only listen to things once, I only read things once, and I make sure I understand them when I go through them. So it might take me hours, because I do extra research while I read and while I watch information, because I make sure I understand it as I go through it. I don't want to go through it a second time, and I don't want to explain things a second time over and over and over, but I still end up doing it. So this aspect of true self, go back in my work, I've redone all my earlier audios. You can go and get it in an audio formatted video, which I recommend because it has more elaboration. Just as this audio is going to probably be twice the length of the article should be, because I'm going into very many side tangent topics that, you can't put everything in one article. Just like you can't put everything in one audio. So go through my other work to get more of an understanding of what I'm talking about and how it all fits together. Because it's a tapestry. It's all, like Mark Passio says, you have to connect the parts together. So if you only have this one article that I'm talking about, well, you don't have everything, all the other things that I'm talking about. So the correspondences are limited, and the previous beliefs you had that you're still attached to because they provided you with an answer at that time, they provided you with that the security and the comfort of having an answer to a question that provides insecurity because it's a doubt and a cure, and when you doubt, it can provide insecurity. So when you fill that doubt and you have an answer to your question, even though it might be false, it's a possibility. But people don't delineate from possible, probable, and actual, and they take their beliefs, their concepts, and they automatically make them real. They say, "Oh, that's the truth. That's the way it is. I know this. This is real." But they don't. They only believe it's real, because people can believe whatever they want. So that's why you need to do deduction and verify your beliefs. Verify your imaginations. Verify the things you invent in your mind. Alright, so it's important to get rid of the evil, to not bear it, to not carry it with you, to not suffer it. The only way you're going to get rid of the suffering that you feel from the evil in the world that is being imposed upon others is to remove that evil. And then we won't have suffering, and then we will be able to create true freedom and peace more actually. Because we're all one. We're all that one, and we're all striving to be more like the force of the one transcendental being of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, etc. So that's how we're all one, because we're all in this together as well. We're all on one planet, and what affects other people also affects us, as we're in one system. So you can't do your own thing in the woods and everyone blows up the world. Well, you're living in one system, in one place, so we're all connected on this one planet. So when other beings suffer, well, it does affect us. Because if that suffering perpetuates to more and more beings, the evil generated by causal agents and makes other beings suffer, well, that evil will just perpetuate if we don't stop it. If no one stops it, it just perpetuates. So you need to feel the suffering in order to stop the suffering. In order to stop the evil, you need to feel the evil, and you need to know what is evil from what is good. A lot of times people can't feel what's evil. They don't feel the suffering of the other animal beings that have free will and feel. They don't feel that suffering. Why don't they feel that suffering? Well, one, they might not be aware of it. And two, even if they see it, well, they still won't feel it. Why don't they feel it? Well, they have an undeveloped heart center, care, compassion, empathy, conscience, and morality. That's undeveloped, first of all. But why is that undeveloped? They don't know it. They don't have it developed because they don't have the knowledge of good and evil that can allow them to break past the conditioning in the false human condition in order to get back to the human nature of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher self, and thereby actually feel reality for what it is. And then when you feel reality, then you'll care to do something about it, because you need to be affected by it. Affect, as I've explained in the Trinity of Consciousness, you have cognition, which is thought, and affection, which relates to emotion and the science of affection. So when you're affected by it and you feel it, then you can care about it. Because while you see the animal suffering, you don't care because you have undeveloped care, undeveloped morality, undeveloped conscience, sympathy, compassion, and a heart center. And the only way to develop it is to know the knowledge of good and evil so that you can recognize evil when it's faced in your face, and then you can feel that evil. Because if you don't recognize the evil, then you don't feel the evil. When you're programmed and conditioned into falsity to accept evil, well, you don't recognize it and you won't feel it. So we want to carry back, correspond, and correlate the evil to know better. We want to carry back, correspond, and correlate the evil to better know, understand, and reduce it. So you got to know it, you got to understand it, and then you're going to reduce it. You're going to carry it back, you're going to send it back, you're going to correspond it because it was sent to you, and you're going to bear it until you can send it back. And we're going to bear all the evil in the world until we can send it back and destroy it and reduce it and eliminate it. And we need to feel the suffering that others suffer in order to recognize the evil being done. And it's animals that suffer. That's where the evil is being done, is on animal beings, because we have consciousness expressive capabilities and we have free will. That's where the morality applies, because we are the beings that can suffer. We can cry. We feel. We express the feelings. We express the feelings as crying. We express the feelings as joy. We express it physiologically in our ability to move and interact in our environment and with each other. That's what the animal being is. That's why it's out of the 6 kingdoms, it's the higher order manifestation of biological life. Animals are organic because they have organs. Plants are not organic. Despite how science wants to spin things, go look at the etymology. I've broken that down in living experience, action, choice, and emotion. A bunch of etymological breakdown there to clarify people's misconceptions about consciousness and life and emotions and choice. So we have to send back the evil to... We want to carry back and correspond and correlate the evil, so we need to better know, understand, and reduce it. We don't mind carrying, suffering, enduring the truth and good if we care for truth. Like I said, the truth is light and the evil is a burdensome thing to carry, so people don't want to be compassionate, they don't want to have empathy, they don't want to feel the evil in the world. They want to ignore the evil in the world because that's a heavy burden to carry and suffer and endure in compassion and in sympathy and in empathy. It is a hard burden to carry, but only through the recognition of how others suffer and how we all suffer can you recognize the oneness and the systems dependent on how we're all in one system. And the only way to get rid of evil is to remove the suffering of evil being created and imposed on people. I'm not talking about food shortages or whatever just happens naturally where you live if there was no evil created, but usually those shortages are created by evil people in false ways of living that create a disparity and in wealth and in control and conditioning other people to accept that control. And we live in a screwed up way of living, so you can't really say that there is nowhere that there's evil and there's only suffering. Pretty much right now the suffering that exists is created by us humans, the ones who create evil, because we are the ones with the greatest capacity to create. We have the knowledge of good and evil. Other animals, not so much. Some of them, they can act in expressive capacities of good or evil, but they don't always know what they're doing. Like I've mentioned in other audios about the lion who didn't eat the antelope or whatever and started to take care of it as its own young. Well, it broke past its nature programming, the boundaries and limits and programs of its physiological body, and the free will capacity for care and doing good overrode its natural programming of a predator, and it didn't kill it, it started to take care of it. So there's aspects even in the lower order consciousness and not just humans where we can exemplify aspects of the transcendental being. So we don't mind carrying, suffering, enduring the truth and good if we care for truth. That is fine. We can have passion, hurt for, yearn for, and bear the burden for standing for truth. This driving force of passion, what we hurt for inside to have, is the destination we cannot reach here, for the totality of truth is not found here. So you can't, like I've been talking about, you can't reach that destination because it's not here. It's a transcendental aspect of being. You can't reach the totality of truth. It's a perfection. It's elsewhere. So you see where all of these correspondences, again, the more correspondences you make, as long as they're grounded in reality, the more aspects of truth you can gain. But when you correspond belief with belief, all you have is a free-floating structure that's not grounded in reality. So the destination, the perfection, the totality, God, source, all, etc., one, true self, higher self, all that stuff, truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. Well, that's not here. It's not in the effect. It's actually part of the cause of the transcendental being, the prime mover. It's not in the effect of manifested reality, but it can be expressed through reality. It can be expressed in reality through individual identity consciousness that is in reality as an identity consciousness. It's not an identity consciousness outside of reality, it's only that inside of reality. And those beings can express transcendental aspects of being. You see, outside of physicality, there's no memory, there's no identity, there's no me and you, and I know this and you know that. There's none of that. Those are human things. So we anthropomorphize and project far too much of ourselves onto the prime cause that we can conceptually arrive at through logic of causality, of a prime cause and an unmoved mover, or else it's infinitely regressive, and there's an unmoved there's a cause for a cause for a cause forever. At some point, conceptually, you have to stop and say there's a prime mover, an unmoved mover, a first cause, and that's where the concept of God comes from. But then it gets distorted in religious bullshit and in lower order consciousness, where they distort things and make it literal, and then anthropomorphize and project characteristics of humans onto it, and that's where you get the story of the Bible. And that's why people logically reject the image of God as portrayed by religionists, because it is ridiculous. But they think it's literal, because that's what the religionists tell them, and the atheists don't take the time in their own minds to actually think things through themselves, and they just accept the concept that other people fed them, and the concept of this literal God being that's like a human. Well, of course they're going to reject that, but they're too stupid to think of for things on their own. They're too stupid to think of the concept on their own, and think of causality and go through the thinking themselves. They just accept the bullshit from religionists, the image that's induced from their words and their stories, and then they oh, well, that's the image I have of God. Well, of course I'm going to reject that. Oh, and then I'm going to call myself an atheist. Well, congratulations on being another dumbass and not thinking for yourself. So properly it would be agnostic. I was never atheist, I was agnostic. I would still say I'm agnostic because these are beliefs. These are concepts I have. Do I have any proof of this? No. Where could I possibly derive proof of any of this? There's only aspects that I can tie back to reality. So you start from the induction of the prime cause and the prime mover first cause, and then you deduce back from there and see what you can figure out. And that's what I do. I induce and deduce, induce and deduce. I'm trying to figure out reality. But the atheists, well, they're not doing the deduction, they're not doing their own induction, and they're not doing the deduction from the induction of the religionists to see where their induction fails and where it actually has aspects of truth that they can that they've deduced, and then they can further induce from those verified aspects. So if you have the first cause, and then you have aspects of good which are not existent in themselves, so where does good, truth, love, where do these things reside? If they are existent through expressions of beings such as ourselves, then they can be aspects, transcendental aspects of being, and they reside somewhere else. So it's all conceptual, but it's again derived from ourselves and reality that we see. It's a whole framework and model that I'm making, and it's very different from other people's, because I'm taking a lot of time to think of things, and I'm redoing everything. I'm not accepting religious beliefs and spiritual beliefs, so-called spiritual beliefs, I have to reinvent things myself and see what is true and what is not true based on what I see in reality, what I understand about reality. So if you look at my work, I think I understand a lot about reality compared to a lot of other people. So when I join things together and I try to make sense of it, well, this is the model and concept I've come up with which makes the most sense. So instead of being an atheist, be an agnostic and say you don't know. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to say I know. You're going to say you know? Well, I say bullshit, you don't know. Because you can't prove it. It's conceptual. It's in your mind. You can see aspects of it in reality that you're going to try to associate with these other concepts that you derive, but you can't know them for sure. They feel right. They sound good, so you accept them until something better comes along to explain it better. So I accepted religious beliefs as possible. They didn't make sense to me, but I don't know, so I was an agnostic, and I'd still consider myself an agnostic, because these aren't things that I can know. I can know things that I can ostensibly point to and verify in my reality. Even if I can't point to it directly, it's still in reality and I can still explain it. So truth, you can't point to truth. It's not an aspect of being in itself. It doesn't exist in itself. Animal does not exist in itself. Cat does not exist in itself. Human does not exist in itself. These are aspects. These are secondary. There's primary substance and secondary substance. So I'm the primary substance, and within me the secondary substance of human, the species. But it doesn't exist in itself. It's only existent through the individual particulars, such as our identity that we manifest. But the soul doesn't have an identity. It's only a non-divisible, which is where the universal individual, it's an individual, but in the universal class. It's not in the particularized class of reality. It's in the unseen realm, which is where human is, and cat is, and animal is. And that's where truth is, and love, and good, and right, because it's not in the particularized reality, although it can be manifested in the particularized reality. And that's why we can create causal links through these conceptions of deriving the term transcendental being, or transcendental aspects of being, or aspects of the transcendental being is more accurate. It's all conceptual through a relation with the particulars in reality. But when you're just going to say you know these things and that it's 100% sure, well, you're lying to yourself. It's a belief that you can tie back to reality, and there's a high degree of probability that it's true, but it's not an actual. You'll never be able to prove it. It's only in your mind that you can continuously verify it and correspond and bring aspects of correspondence in order to strengthen the viability of that concept. The more pieces you add, the more strength the concept receives. And that's a process of acquiring truth. That's how most of our truth is acquired. We believe in false things. We gain information that diminishes the veracity of that concept, and instead we adopt another concept that makes more sense than the previous one, because now we recognize the previous one has flaws in it, and the new one has less flaws, and it makes more sense. It explains more. So that's what I do. I induct and deduct, and I try to find what makes most sense, and this is what I've come up with. And yes, it's different than all the popularized things and popular New Age and so-called spiritual beliefs. Yes, it's very different from all that. I've come up with this on my own, based on recognizing that the inductive concepts that religionists came up with didn't make sense. There was a lot of flawed aspects to it. So I reevaluated those terms, and how could they make more sense? And I have made more sense of those terms, and the terms are not defined as the religionists and pseudo-spiritualists want to define them. I've redefined them in relation to deduction in reality, not just a pure induction and belief based on doubt and our insecurities from that doubt, and requiring an answer to be maintained and believed in order for that doubt and insecurity to stay at bay, so that we can remain in the comfort and security of our beliefs. I don't want to believe in anything. I've emptied my cup, and I've unlearned what I've learned, and now I'm relearning things. But all previous things that I've accepted, I have abandoned them. And the things that I'm proposing now in my work are things that I've reevaluated myself with my own thinking. So when I started my work on the higher self and the true self and the truth, love, good, right, morality, well, I was developing it. And it started off intuitively and understanding from what Mark Passio said, and then I started to think about it more and deducing that concept and seeing how it relates to reality, and then inducing and changing the concept, and then deducing back to reality, and then inducing back and changing it. So that's where I came up with the understanding of truth is love, is good, is right, is morality, is natural law, is higher self, is true self, is higher will. All that, it's through induction and deduction. That's logic. This is how we understand reality. So we can never have the totality of truth. We can never be perfect. But that doesn't stop us from reaching for the truth, from reaching for self-improvement, betterment, change, evolution, etc. The good kind of passion, hurt, suffering, endurance is with truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. Just like that is the right thing we want to carry, and we want to carry back and get rid of evil, not hold on to it, and suffer and endure it. We don't want to hold on to the evil. We don't want to endure it. We don't want to suffer it. But the good, sure, no problem. We'll endure that for the rest of our lives, and we'll be very happy. And it will create true freedom and peace. But we can only get there once we remove the suffering that we feel from other people, and we require to feel the suffering of other people and other beings, other animals, in order to stop the evil from being created that we create towards them. Because we're the ones doing it. We are the generators of evil. That's the burden of free will, is to do whatever you want, good or evil. That's why the knowledge of the tree of good and evil is required when evil exists. And if evil didn't exist, then you wouldn't have any knowledge of evil, because it wouldn't be in existence for you to know. And then you'd have innocence. If you want more on that, I've done a series of articles on a short one on the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and other ones on falsity and evil, etc. So the bad kind of passion is to hold on to falsity and evil, to carry and bear it, rather than send back the force of evil and remove ourselves from its grasp and weight. So yes, you have to be under the weight and burden of the evil, endure and suffer it, but you're not going to hold on to it forever. You have to eventually send it back. The bad kind of passion is to hold on to it forever and never do anything about it, which is the situation we have now. And we just keep getting more and more evil. We're holding on to the falsity and evil. We're carrying it and we're just holding on to it. Evil is done and we just keep taking it in an imbalanced feminine aspect of the slave consciousness, where we're just submissive and we just keep being passive receivers of evil. We just keep bearing the weight, carrying it, and it's going to shatter us, it's going to destroy us. So another mechanism to prevent the weight of evil from breaking our hearts, breaking our spirit, breaking our care for truth and morality, is to ignore the evil. So you hence ignore truth and morality by ignoring the evil, so that your capacity to sustain a semblance of psychological sanity is maintained. Whereas if your heart broke, well, you'd have a psychosomatic, a psychoaffective break, and then it would affect your operation in reality. But if you have a semblance of sanity, then you can continue to believe that everything's okay, and you can continue to perpetuate the current condition, which is immorality and evil. And you'll continue to bear and grasp it. You'll continue to bear the weight, because you don't want to let go of it, because you're ignoring it. You've learned to endure it as a passive, imbalanced feminine consciousness. You're just enduring and putting up and just receiving the evil, and that's it. You're not sending it back. You're not removing it from existence by sending it back and reciprocating and redressing the wrong. It just keeps compounding and compounding, and everyone keeps suffering more and more. So the only thing that we can do to alleviate it is to increase ignorance through our distractions. So the more distractions we have, the less we pay attention to reality, the less we know about reality, the less knowledge of truth and morality, the less knowledge of good good and evil, and then the less we're able to feel the evil. And we just live in a positivity mask, an optimism bias of thinking everything's okay, even though everyone's a psychopath, because psychopath, again, path and passion, suffer. Psycho, mind, you're suffering in the mind. That's why I say psychopathy. Well, we're all psychopaths. Everyone's suffering in the mind. If you are recognizing the suffering of others, and you have compassion and empathy, and you can feel the suffering of others, you can feel the evil in the world, well, that creates suffering in the mind, doesn't it? Isn't that what drives us to remove evil? Is that we feel the suffering and we recognize it in our mind? There's a suffering in our mind. Or it means something else where it's not a legitimate suffering. Maybe psychopathy has to do with, in the terms that, not in the etymology of psycho and suffering in the mind, suffering in the psyche, suffering in consciousness. Maybe it doesn't have to do with the recognition of truth in reality, that the suffering exists. Maybe it's simply the suffering specifically in the mind from falsity, that you're attached to falsity, and that creates misalignment between your perception of reality and reality as it actually is, and that'll create a suffering. So there's different ways of looking at it. The second way more applies to your misalignment with reality, which will create suffering, and then through that confusion of misalignment with reality, in that ignorance and confusion, you'll seek to externally control, and that's where we have the standard aspect of psychopaths, where they're trying to control people and do evil to people. So maybe it stems from that second aspect and not the first one where I was saying, suffering in the mind. Well, we're all suffering in the mind, so we're all different levels of psychopathy because we live in a psychopathic system of predatory domination. So, you can look at it both ways and they both apply. Or the first one that I used, maybe it's wrong. Maybe it doesn't mean that, just simply suffering in the mind, that we all suffer because we're all living in falsity. And the only way we'll be able to get rid of the psychopathy in our minds, the suffering in our minds, is when we remove the suffering from the world. We remove the evil, and then there won't be suffering, and then we won't have the knowledge of evil in the world, and the suffering of evil in the world, and the compassion and empathy and sympathy for the suffering of others, and so there won't be any more suffering, so then we won't be suffering in our mind. So the only way to get rid of psychopathy is to remove evil. Because we're all in modalities of psychopathy. We're all in modalities of Satanism, where we don't actualize our behavior and our actions and in our goal to end evil wholesale from the root causal factor. Some people are still stuck in, my human race is more important than all animals and 50 billion animals that are murdered, and the root causal factor that comes from generating evil, which is a disconnection from those less like you, which are the animals, which is the root causal factor for generating evil. The first harm done was against those less like you, which are the animals. And then there's the 50 billion, and it's a harm against others versus the human sphere of interaction and system of living we've created is more of a self-harm. So there's all these aspects that keeps you in the when you focus only on the human sphere, well, it's still my survival, my freedom, and my truth, because only humans can help me end the human sphere of evil and suffering. But then you just ignore the over 50 billion animals that are murdered every year. You're not talking about that. Because the depth of understanding the care for truth and morality isn't as deep as you think it is. You're still only at the human sphere. You're not targeting evil and slavery wholesale, all the way from the bottom foundation, the root causal factor, which is where all animals lie. Until you get there, you're not doing it right. As far as I'm concerned, you're not. That's why in almost every article I come back to the animal issue, because it is the central importance. If you can correct that, everything else will cascade in cause and effect. It will ripple up in changes. You start at the root causal factor, rather than starting the second layer up and working on that for centuries, and then eventually getting to the root causal factor after 50 billions and billions and billions of more animals get killed, murdered, enslaved, and violated every year. well, I don't want to wait that long. That's too long to allow that suffering to continue. So I'm willing to put up with the chaos that we perpetuate on ourselves, the suffering and enslavement we perpetuate on ourselves. Natural law level 2, self-inflicted harm, so that we can focus on natural law level 1, which is the greater violation of harm against others, which we don't have a right to do. Alright, so the evil we carry, that we create ourselves, and that we are coerced and allowed to continue, is a weight we must bear, and that's collective karma. We're all in this together. We're all the one true self, manifested in reality in different times and places with different impositions from our environment that create different unique individuals and identities. But we're all the one true self. We're all on one planet. As one being suffers, we all suffer. So we must continue to bear the weight of evil, because we're coercing ourselves to allow it to continue as long as we don't do anything to stand up and stop it. We're just letting it happen. We're coercing ourselves to allow evil because we're afraid. We're cowards. We don't care for truth enough, truth and morality. So we ignore truth and morality, and then we just focus on distractions so that we don't have to bear the suffering and bear the evil that would eventually break our hearts and break us and shatter us from all the trauma. So we ignore the trauma in the world, we ignore the suffering, and that allows us to live in the semblance of sanity when it's not sane, and we're living an insane life, an insane society. But our continued rejection of truth and morality, and our denial of it, and our ignorance of it, and refusal to look at the evil and the suffering, well, that keeps the evil and suffering perpetuating. And we believe falsity is good, and we believe evil is, we believe falsity is truth, and we believe evil is good, and we believe immorality is morality. So we're living insanely, but we believe we're sane because it's only a semblance of sanity. So endure is related to truth, as they are both from the root deru or drew. There is also the word druid that has the same root and meaning. So druid, or the magi of truth or something, I forget. Anyways, it's in the etymology. So, here we go. Celtic compound druid, probably representing Old Celtic durwos, which is true, from Proto-Indo-European dru, which meaning tree. So you can see how endure, hard, right? Endure in French is dur, something dur. It's hard. So when you endure, it's when we go back up here, firm, solid, steadfast. From deru and true. So why is true related to that and druid? Because the tree of the oak and had to do with truth, because the truth is hard. You can't break the truth. So that's why the tree and the druid and true comes from the same word. And wid, to know. So druid, to know the tree, to know the truth. So the druids were those who knew the truth, at least etymologically. So a druid is to know that which is firm, solid, and steadfast, as a tree is, the solid foundation of reality and truth. So it's symbolic again. People, this is like what religious would do. Oh my God, the tree's a god, and we're going to worship the tree. Well, no, we're talking symbolism. This is what all the early texts of humanity use symbolism to describe aspects of reality through allegory, metaphor, simile. It's all symbols. It's imagery in the mind, imagery of fiction, or imagery of symbols that can be corresponded to reality in order to enhance our understanding of reality. But you have to know the language of the symbol in order to have the eyes and the ears to see and to hear. So the druid is to know that which is firm, solid, and steadfast. And when you think of truth, you think of firm, solid, steadfast. In my Truth and Love article, an audio, I have in there forthright, steadfast, honest, frank, when you're being in truth, when you live in truth and honesty, you're solid, you're firm, you're steadfast. So it's living in truth. You can see how this relates to the tree. The tree is solid foundation. It's firm. It's not moving. It's immovable. I'm sure you can cut it down. You can run into a truck and maybe it'll uproot it. But the tree is strong. It's really in the ground. It's planted. It's firm and solid. It's a symbol for truth. So druid, to know the tree, to know the truth, to know what is firm, solid, and steadfast. What's vitriol? To visit the interior of the earth and live upright, steadfast, firm, solid. So when you're seeking truth, you're speaking truth, you stand firm in the truth, and you do not waver. You do not go on wavering, winding paths and trying to bypass delicate sensibilities and emotional blockages and all this bullshit. No, you speak the truth as it is, and you deal with crap as it comes. You've got to be frank and forthright. So the druid, endure, and tree relate. Endure is about truth and good, but is always taken in the negative about falsity and evil, while dual meanings exist. Usually endure, it's always, you don't talk about enduring in the positive sense, just like you don't talk about suffering in the positive sense. So here we can see how passion, we think of it as a positive, but it has a negative because it relates to suffering, and I've explained how they're all related. I'm going to get into more explanations too. The opposition of truth and falsity plays out in our life as enduring the hurt and suffering all around that we may feel in order not to break and fall apart in some form of psychosis or breakdown. Because if we don't endure it, if we don't make our hearts hard, then we won't be enduring the evil in reality, and then we will break down in psychosis, or psychoaffective, psychoemotive, a breakage through the quote heart, through the quote spirit, as I talked about earlier. And alternatively, those who are still asleep and unconscious and dead, well, they ignore reality and they don't have this problem because they're living in insanity and they think it's sane. So they don't even have to harden their hearts because they're ignoring the evil. They don't have to work on themselves and increase their care and heart center because they're already ignoring reality and ignoring the suffering and the evil. So they don't need to harden their hearts to the capacity of other people who are facing things honestly. We need to be strong and withstand the onslaught against our quote minds and quote hearts if we are to learn about the reality we live in and overcome these barriers of falsity. This is the crappy end of the stick we have to endure. All the evil we let continue. This is what it's about. This is the crappy end of the stick of enduring. It's because we let evil continue. So you want to stop enduring evil? You want to stop feeling the suffering? Well, then let's get together and let's do something about the evil. Or don't even get together. Just do it on our own. Let's get rid of the evil. But if we're going to get together in true unity, then we have to align with truth and morality, because that's where true unity comes from. So the only people you can unite with to end evil are those who understand the need to end evil and are willing to end evil from the moral baseline which you live at. And if you don't live at the moral baseline and you recognize one evil is wrong, well, then you can ally with those people who recognize that one evil and work to remove that one evil. And the rest of us who recognize the moral foundation and the baseline and the root causal factor, well, we can unite together and we can work from that baseline to remove all evil and all slavery. And meanwhile, you'll be working in your corner and you're still going to be perpetuating evil. Because you don't want to face it honestly. You don't want to go to the moral foundation. You don't want to go to the moral baseline. You don't want to go to the root causal factors. So you keep perpetuating it in your ignorance. You choose that ignorance. Why? Because you fear truth and morality. You do not want to face it honestly. So you hold on to your beliefs and they allow you to perpetuate your way of living because you don't care for truth and morality. Not really. You just pretend you do. You lie to yourself and tell yourself you do. because you recognize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 aspects of evil and immorality and you're trying to remove them. Well, why aren't you going deep enough? Why are you still refusing to accept that information of the depth of morality? You don't care. You fear. We need to be strong and withstand the onslaught against our, quote, minds and hearts if we are to learn about the reality we live in and overcome these barriers of falsity. This is the crappy end of the stick. We have to endure all the evil we let continue. The thing we want to actually endure and carry, suffer and bear, is truth and morality. That doesn't actually weigh us down like evil and falsity does. It actually lifts us up like wings. That's right, because the truth and morality, as represented by Ma'at, the overarching Egyptian concept of personifications of nature and reality, truth and morality, is like the unity in morality. Unity is based in morality graph. The more you go for truth and morality, the more you lift up, and the more you rise the bar up, and the more you reach aspects of freedom, true peace, and true unity. But if you go the other way and you don't seek the truth and morality, well, you're going down into evil and falsity, and that's going to weigh you down, and it's going to put you into division and war and slavery and chaos. I'll be getting more into the elemental symbolism when I get into my new natural law presentation on causality and what karma really is and all these things, and explain it grounded in reality and not in beliefs in alleged spiritual components. It may be true, but I can't prove it, and you can't say you know it because you don't know it. There's a difference between knowing something as it is represented in reality and believing something as it's represented in another realm, that you don't live there, you don't exist there. And you will never exist there because you exist here. You are an ego personality identity construct. That's what we all are. We, as a source of our energy, our ability to exist, well, that source, yes, that's over there. But that's not us. We are here. People want to completely dissociate with themselves and, oh, yes, your true self. It's a word to represent the source origins of the cause instead of the effect. So hence true self, higher self, because the cause is higher, the truth is higher. It's the true self. The true self because it's to embody truth and morality. It's true, as opposed to the false self, which embodies falsity and evil. So it's called the true self for that reason as well. There's many correspondences. It's not the one true self for you, and I got my own true self up there as a soul, and everyone's got their own true self as a soul with its own identity. No, that's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. These are the beliefs we get fed and buy into, and then perpetuate, because they give us an answer to a question and doubt about death and what comes after, or why we're here, or how does the universe function. These are all beliefs and concepts in order to try to make sense of things that we can never really know. Not fully, not accurately, and certainly not through the religious and pseudo-spiritual conceptions that have been propagated on this planet in the mainstream. You can pretty much be sure that if it's in the mainstream as a spiritual concept, it is most likely false. I'm not saying it will be false, but most likely it is, because the mainstream needs to have bullshit in order to keep mainstream into bullshit, into the mainstream insanity of bullshit. To keep you living bullshit, to keep you perpetuating bullshit, to keep you living as a piece of shit, creating shit evil into the world. So you want to stop being a piece of shit? Seek truth and morality and align with it, embody it and live it, become it in your life. Be natural moral law. Be a natural law causal agent of reciprocity and redress. And if everyone does that, we're going to end evil in a snap of a finger. The more people get involved, the quantum effect will happen, the quantum amount of people will be realized, and then we can actually physically do things rather than just speak influence to try to get people to change themselves. We'll actually be able to put down evil that is evil, because we'll be in an aggregate collective grouping of karma, as opposed to an individual, just me and the wrongs done to me that I'm going to focus on in my little bubble of Satanism, my freedom, my truth, my survival. Once we expand beyond that and we unite on the base morality, well then the evils that we can only now in the collective aggregate speak about and influence to try to diminish, because we don't have enough numbers to act physically. But once we reach that physical numbers, well then we don't have to just simply speak and influence to stop evil. Well, then we can actually act physically because we have the numbers, as opposed to 1 versus a million. Well, you're going to get squashed and you're going to get eradicated. They'll just murder you. You need numbers. Numbers really, 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 really matter in order to fix evil. It's not going to happen just a few of us. We need numbers in order to eventually come to the position of acting physically. So true relates to steady, steadfast, firm, solid, and wood. To endure, to harden in, to make hard, solid, steadfast, firm inside, to make true inside, endure, injure, insure, in truth. Did you see what I did there? I'll explain it. Okay, so endure is en, which means in, and jur, zur. Now, an aspect of philology that many people may not be aware of, but I'm aware of when I do my etymological sourcing, is you have words that are interchangeable. I've already mentioned on abracadabra how B and V change, but B and P change, G and K change, C and K change, L and M change, M and L change, L and R can change. You have S and Z that can change. You have D and T that can change. I think I've covered them all. I'm not sure. G and K. I think B and P and G to P. Yeah, I think they can shift. And F and P. F, P, and B. Anyways, they can all, through different layers, they can all, the consonants can change. The vowels aren't as important. As you can look back in Hebrew, they only use consonants, and the vowels were contextual and filled in to create the appropriate meaning in the original Hebrew. So D can go to T. So you have endure is injure, zur hard. It's hard in. So that's what it's mean, in endure, right? To make hard inside, as I've explained at the beginning of this article. So when you have injure, you can make that inter. So when you have inter, we'll switch the E, switch the R and the U around. So right, just take the U and the R. So T-U-R-E, you make T-R-U-E. So endure, injure, inter, intrue. Understand? The truth needs to be endured. Intrue needs to be brought in. The truth of reality. The truth of reality, both in its beauty and horror, both in the good and the evil, the good and the bad, the truth and the falsity. The falsity that currently manifests is truth level 1, which is reality level 1. It's not the truth that we need to create. Truth level 2, what ought to be. Truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. That's truth level 2 that we need to create. But the truth needs to be endured. All the truth, all the beauty and the horror in the world, the reality as it is, reality as we currently manifest it, in aspects of being that should be, in aspects of being that should not be, or a negative aspect of the positive being. We need to accept reality as it is and endure it. The truth of reality needs to be endured, suffered, carried, and bared with as our passion, as we quote, hurt for. The ramming drive and force we have to move us forward, or what we move towards, and it fuels us as we get more of it, to make ourselves hard inside, like truth is hard and solid, to endure the truth in all the beauty and horror of the current condition resulting from falsity we allow to exist. So the endure, we let truth in, it hurts us, but remember, hurt had to do with a striking and a ram, which requires a force, a drive. So the hurt, the truth comes in, hurts us. We need to have a hard heart to endure the truth that comes in. The truth will create a driving force. The driving force, you remember, hurting for, passion, care, desire, seeking. So the ramming driving force, the driving force of care, what motivates us, care and desire, passion, will move us forward. Why? Because we've faced reality as it is and we've endured it. We've brought in the truth in true, and it hurt us, and then it affected us, because that's what the hurt does, and in the motive capacity in the quote heart, to harden the heart, it hurt us, but it didn't break us. In a sense, it makes us stronger, because we're facing reality, and we're evolving consciousness by facing reality. So the ramming drive is our care, the force to move us forward, or what we move forward, or what we move towards. And it fuels us as we get more of it to make ourselves hard inside, like truth is hard and solid. To endure the truth and all its beauty and horror of the current condition, from falsity we allowed to exist. So this is the collective karma again. I'll keep bringing it up. We allow it to exist. It's not that. It's everyone that's come before for thousands of years that have created the condition, and other people have let it continue, that have reached us, the position we're in, and other people who have fought it and reduced it, and we keep going back and forth, and we're at where we're at now because of everyone, all the quote reincarnations of the one, not individual entity, personality souls, but the one manifesting as an individual unit of consciousness. We're the ones that do it as ego personality identities. We create the evil and we allowed it to exist, and everyone else allowed it to exist, and that's why things never changed, because everyone kept allowing it to exist. That's collective karma. All the past lives, every life before us has created our condition right here where we are. It's not that my soul had an identity and I came from it, and before that there was it incarnated previously 100 years ago, and there was another person that lived their own life, and that became part of the identity of the soul unit, and then mine, when I die, I'm going to become, my memories or whatever is going to accumulate in the soul identity. No, hogwash. We are part of the true self. It's all the same, and we incarnate. Everyone's incarnating. It's simultaneous. It's not linear. It's all across time. It's always the same thing incarnating. Trying with free will, so you can create a hell or you can create a heaven. Well, we're having a hard time learning our lessons. Karma, again. The wheel of karma, the wheel of time. Do we learn from our mistakes, or do we keep cycling and repeating them? And we have the opportunity to learn from them because it keeps going round and round, and we can keep learning, or we can keep ignoring it. Keep creating a hell or go for a heaven. It's all us that does it. The collective karma is every past life that's come before us. So my dad died, well, he was a past life. When someone else dies, well, they're no longer a life, so they're a past life. Right? It's not a life that's existing now, it's in the past. So they're a past life. So all the billions of past lives that have been on this planet have created evil, or have let evil continue, or have tried to fight evil, and that has resulted in our current condition. So my current condition is based on all past lives, and your current condition is based on all past lives that have created the world we have. That's real karma. That's cause and effect karma, not a pseudo-spiritual belief in karma. That's real karma, grounded in reality. You can see it. It's easy to understand. Just understand how cause and effect understands, and you'll understand how aggregate collective karma really understands, how aggregate collective karma really works. And the individual karma isn't one from your soul where you're born into a poor position or a better position based on past life experience of another specific individual, which was allegedly you, through that alleged soul personality identity. No. The individual karma is, when I slap you, you slap me back. So if you don't slap me back, well, I'm never going to get karma back. It's all up to us. The causal agents are the ones who are natural law. You want to look at karma, cause and effect, natural law? We are karma. We are natural law. The collective karma is we who created it. The karma coming back on me for slapping you, well, you are the one that needs to become a natural law, causal agent of reciprocity and redress, and engage in your individual karma. Send that back to me. Carry back the evil. Correspond the evil. Bear back the evil. Don't keep carrying it and be a passive, submissive, feminine slave consciousness. We need to get active in the masculine. You need to send back the evil. You can always engage in mercy and see that the other person is suffering in their mind, in the psyche, the psychopathy, or whatever, and you're going to try to heal them so you can engage in other laws, the law of mercy, and you don't have to reciprocate. But for the great evils, yeah, we do have to reciprocate it, and you are allowed in every case to reciprocate what was done to you. You don't have to. You can choose a different way. You can choose mercy and try to heal the other person. But this is how karma works. If you want, things don't just happen magically where someone's going to face consequences for their actions magically. No. It's a cause and effect. The ones in your life are the ones who are going to make you feel the consequences of your actions. If there's a murderer and no one stops the murderer, he will never face consequences to his actions. You can believe, yes, it is a belief, believe whatever you want about the universe is going to set things into balance. That's all belief. All belief. It's all conceptual. Where's your proof of it? There is none. See, cause and effect works in seen and unseen ways. So when you set actions into motion, it's possible you're going to get back negative consequences, even though someone did not directly do something to you in your life. In a one-to-one reciprocation of karma where you slap someone and they slap you back. Or if you murder someone and someone's going to kill you and then put you down. Well, it doesn't always happen like that. You can get away with it, but there's unseen causal forces that you might not be aware of, and this is collective karma, where everything we put out comes back to all of us in the end. It's not an individual basis, it's a collective basis. Karma's big, and the only way it works on an individual basis is when individual causal agents take up the responsibility under truth and morality to act as natural law causal agents of reciprocity and redress and to right the wrongs themselves. Otherwise, it goes into the collective karma of generating our collective co-created reality. So let's say you only had one person doing the murder and getting away with it. What if you had 1 million people murdering and getting away with it? Well, that would greatly affect the collective karma on our planet. Cause and effect would alter our planet. The karma of those 1,000,000 people and us doing nothing about it would change the dynamic of the planet, and we would be living in a different reality. We would be living in a murderous reality where we allow murders to happen. That would be our current condition based on our karma of letting it happen and based on the karma of those who create the evil. So I hope karma is now starting to make sense for a lot of people, and this belief, which I call pseudo-spiritual because it's purely conceptual and it's not grounded in reality, that oh, the universe is magically just going to right things, the wrong in your next life and all that. No. Every individuated unit from the true self source is an individuated unit with its own life and its own free will, and it can do whatever it wants. It doesn't face the consequences of one particular past life. It faces the consequences of everyone on this planet creating the reality we collectively co-create, and that's the consequences they face. So I was born into this world of wars and falsity and a predatory dominator psychopathic system of living based on all the past lives before me that created this world. It has nothing to do with a one past life of a karma reincarnation conceptual belief that comes from religious dogma and control and bullshit beliefs to give you security and comfort about doubts and things you have questions for but don't have answers. This is all psychological, this aspect of these religious notions. But once you start to correlate them with reality, once you start to deduce these concepts back to reality, the concepts fade away in their superficial form. And what's left is you can see what they actually mean as reflected in reality. And that's what I just explained about how karma actually works. Because I've verified it in reality. I didn't just come to this all of a sudden. And I've been into Mark Passio's work for since 2011. So The summer of 2011, something like that. And this understanding of karma and how it really works into this depth of detail, well, I've only come across this understanding in the past few months. As I understand more of reality, as I evolve consciousness, as I understand more how morality functions, how karma actually functions, well, I could take the word karma and how I understood how cause and effect actually functions. I actually got to the understanding of how karma actually functions because, as you know, Mark Passio, you can associate things, and I've created Mark Passio said karma, also known as, aka for natural law, you have the golden rule, you have karma, you reap what you sow, etc., etc. But it's all based in cause and effect. So as I understood more of cause and effect and how the causal relations in reality worked, I was able to reformulate the false concept of karma from the religious notion and alleged spiritual magical fixing everything for us. No, it doesn't work like that. Not fixing everything for us, but sending back to us what we create from our other life. No, it works on all lives because we're all the true self and we're all incarnating and there's no other identity. It's all based on the past lives of everyone before us and the current lives of everyone here. That's what we create the condition. That's what your conditions are created from. It's not because your soul and your karma and you reincarnate from that specific soul with the karma of the past life that had crap or good or whatever and the karmic meter built up. That is not how it works at all. That's just a belief you have. And that's one conception you've had. You've been fed that belief and you continue to believe it. Whereas I was fed that belief and I was like, well, there's something wrong with it. It doesn't make sense. That's not fair. That's not right. That's not a just universe. That's not a caring universe. There's something wrong with that belief. So I'm not accepting it. Sure, it might be possible, but when I actually take the time, when I've evolved consciousness enough, I understand enough about reality, well, then I can revisit that concept and make it better, which is what I've done. So I've taken the word karma and understand it through cause and effect, and how karma is, through this book I've been reading, ka-ma'at. Ma'at is the embodiment of truth and justice and good and order and morality. That's the personification of the transcendental aspect of being, which is why Ma'at is the overarching goddess, the god, the overarching principle of all Egyptian symbolism. And Amun-Ra, Ra, or whatever, Ma'at's above that. And I'll prove it to you where the male is and where the female is, and how the female is actually the sun and the light and the air, and the male is the dark and in the earth. And then later, sure, you can change that and create new symbolism where the female is the dark and then the male is the light. Yeah, sure, you can do that. Symbols can be altered in any way you want to express a certain model you want. So you have the Hermetic model, and where the light is male and the dark is feminine, and you can express things in that capacity, yes. But I'm going back to an original representation of nature and science that we can derive from observation of reality, and what is the original concept, what does it come from, and then you can see, well, later it was changed and it was inverted, and then the male became the sun and the female became the dark. Well, I'm going to explain it in a different way, directly from nature, and you'll see how obvious it is and how we've all been tricked into believing. And that's where the patriarchal God comes from, because the patriarch was then in the sky, but it's actually the matriarch, Ma'at, the divine creator, the generator. The man isn't the generator and the creator. Do you produce babies, men? No. See, our concepts are all fucked to hell. The symbolism is all bastardized. The generator, the creator, is feminine. It's not a woman, it's feminine. Okay? These are personifications of aspects of reality that we're symbolically representing. Gods don't exist. Okay? The Egyptian gods are personifications that first started out in animal form, and then human and animal form, and then human form. But they were personified through animal characteristics. Anyways, I'll get into that at the time. When I get into it, I just wanted to preview. I don't even know what the hell, how I got into this, why I was talking about the feminine and oh yeah, karma, right? So karma, ka ma'at, truth, order, and ka is the dual path of truth or falsity, good or evil, right or wrong, moral or immoral. And so the wheel of karma, the wheel of ka ma'at, is the wheel of our ka, our actions and deeds in one of the two spiritual paths of good or evil. Spiritual, quote, spiritual is moral, because the spirit, quote, spirit, God, source, singularity, all is represented through the higher will, conceptually, through anthropomorphization in our concepts. And then we give this higher will, it created the law. So what law did the Spirit create? The Spirit created the law of morality, natural laws. So being spiritual is being moral. Make sense? So kama'at, the dual paths of spirit, of morality or immorality, and ma'at, representative of truth, justice, order, good. Well, it's the wheel of that. It's whether you're aligning. That's why the scales of judgment in the afterlife, conceptually, symbolically, not real afterlife. Anyways, I've already mentioned that in hinting. So the scale was weighing your hearts, and I've talked about this in an audio yesterday. The way you weigh your heart, quote, symbolically, of deeds and actions against the feather of truth of ma'at. So the kama'at, karma, is the wheel of karma of the spirit of good or evil, and whether you're living in the spirit of ma'at, or whether you're choosing, one of the two, the false path in the two paths. So I'll explain this more in detail, but that's why I'm mentioning karma and how it's actually representative of our actions, and it has nothing to do with reincarnation and karma in that sense of our identity and a soul identity and all these things. It's based in reality. Karma is completely based in reality. It's completely based in cause and effect. You do not need pseudo-spiritual conceptions in order to understand karma. It's completely based in reality. Wholly based in reality. Completely. So I've just explained why that is. And if you still want to believe in your belief, then you're just going to believe in a belief. Whereas I have actually grounded it in reality and explained how karma works in the aggregate collective. It does not work in a magical universal force sending back to you what you put out. We judge, offend, and insult ourselves. We create our own consequences. It's not natural law doing it. It's another symbolic reference. It's not gravity doing something to you. We do it to ourselves. So the consequences you get back are going to be brought upon by other people. And if you want to think, oh, well, the planet blows up, that wasn't brought upon by other people. Yes, it was. It was brought upon by all of us by poisoning our planet where it couldn't sustain life and the biological aspect deteriorated and it becomes like Mars. You're going to think the universe did that to us? No. We did that to ourselves. The universe didn't send anything back. All it is cause and effect. We sent out effects from the causal source as us causal agents. We sent out effects that poisoned our planet. But what's going to happen then? Well, that effect of poisoning the planet is going to generate another cause where the effect is going to be to deteriorate the planet, and then we're all going to die. So we do it to ourselves. Natural law is just a symbol for how we do everything to ourselves. And that's karma. Alright, I'm going to continue with the article. You carry, bear, endure, and suffer evil, and become hard enough not to crack while the evil and falsity is around you, not to falter under its pressure, and wait. So as you recall, I was talking about this very beautiful allegory I find of endure and injure and intrue, and you bring it in, that whole descriptive symbolism the story I was making there, I found that really good, so I'm continuing from that. So you do not falter under its pressure and wait. You don't crack. But it needs to be sent back, not held on to permanently. So you need to be strong enough to hold on to it, to feel it, to suffer and endure. But you don't do that forever. That's just insanity. You got to send it back. That's where you become a natural law agent of reciprocity and redress, and you fight the evil. Truth is to be carried at all time. We have to bear it, all the truth about reality, in its horror and darkness and evil, as well as the beauty, light, and good. So yeah, we have to bear it all the time. As long as evil's there, well, guess what? You're going to have to bear it. You're going to have to feel it. You're going to have compassion and sympathy and empathy, and you're going to have to suffer it through until it's gone. And if we don't happen to do it in our lifetime, well, we're going to be suffering until we die. And then the people who are born after us, well, they're going to continue to suffer until they get it too, because that's the wheel of karma, because we create it all ourselves. We do it all ourselves. It's all done by us, to us. That's it. That's why we are our own worst enemy, personally and collectively. We prevent ourselves from seeing truth because we're so attached to these pseudo-spiritual beliefs that we fail to understand reality correctly. We're so attached to them because of that sense of comfort and security they provide in filling that hole of doubt and the question we have. They provide us with an answer. And because we don't understand enough about reality, we don't understand how to think critically, we don't understand how to verify induction with deduction and continue the process, the grammar, logic, induction loop, induction, deduction, feedback spiral and loop. Well, we end up tacitly accepting what other people sell us. We buy into their beliefs. Why? Because they give us comfort. They give us security in the whole of the doubt and insecurity from the question we didn't have an answer to. See, it's all psychology. Let go of beliefs and verify all your conceptions in reality in order to strengthen the veracity of those conceptions by multiple data points continually being drawn as a bridge between the universal to the particular. And the more aspects you can verify to validate and bring veracity to your concept, well, the more weight, the more solid, the more firm, and the more foundational that concept, that universal will be. So, not falter under its pressure and weight, but it needs to be sent back, not held on to permanently. Truth is to be carried at all time. We have to bear it all. The truth about reality in its horror, darkness, and evil, as well as the beauty, light, and good. Once we remove the evil and falsity, it will no longer be there to be bared with at all. Even if we currently have already removed ourselves from creating it, we still bear it in our existence. So everything I probably talked about, well, most of the stuff I've elaborated on apart from the higher self, true self, karma, and morality and aspects, and how this ties into bearing evil and all that, and how we create our own sufferings. I probably explained a lot of the stuff I'm talking about now because I jumped the gun. The thought popped into my head, and I went into elaborate explanations. But, some of the stuff I've talked about, well, now I'm reading it, and so it's a repetition. Sorry about that. To continue, this is the courage to look into the mirror as well. We have to bear, carry, suffer, and endure the trials and tribulations of honestly facing reality. That's, if you go back to other work I've done on truth, natural law, heaven and hell, Bible symbolism, well, that's the aspect of the narrow path, the hard, narrow path of the hard truth. That's why hard truths need to be faced. That's the truth is love, love is truth. Care for truth and morality. You have to face the hard truths. Go into the shadow, demon, darkness, negative, evil, and immorality of the world in ourselves, us, and the world outside of ourselves, the objective reality, and clean ourselves so that we can clean the outside reality that we create into and is a reflection of us, and we are a reflection of it, or at least in conditioning. We become a reflection of it. So those of us at a capacity to understand how reality really is, we have to change it by changing ourselves so that we can change reality and help others change in alignment with truth and morality. So the trials and tribulations, that's the narrow path, the hard path. It takes a lot of work, honesty, self-respect, self-love, self-knowledge, self-responsibility, like Mark talks about, those 4 self things. We need to develop that. It's the narrow path of truth and morality, the hard path of evolving consciousness, going to higher order consciousness and letting go of our attachments and our desires of lower consciousness, of beastly, carnal, fleshly desires and animalistic tendencies, of amorality into immorality. We need to evolve past that. Trials and tribulations, it's a lot of work. You got to know evil and you got to bear it. Trials and tribulations. Look in the mirror. Keep the true and send back the false. Keep the good, send back the evil. Both need to be faced. Hence we carry and bear the memory through time, either as conceptual knowledge or experiential knowledge, but we are not bearing it through creating it. So we bear it through memory. We're not creating the evil, but it's still existing through other people experiencing it, and we have it in memory. And so we still have to get rid of it, send it back. Even though it's not on us directly, it's still being created. We have to send back the evil to the source as a -1 to reduce the power of evil. I've talked about that in other audios related to evil. So we stand together and hold up truth in our lives in the long term, while the evil we are holding up in our lives must be stopped. The force of evil must be sent back, not carried further, sent back to evil to nullify the cord it has attached to us, that we are feeding it through upholding it. So the reason the evil is being upheld is because when we create it, we create an umbilical cord to evil, where we generate the +1 force by us creating the +1. So evil didn't exist. Now we're generating evil. We're creating it through our free will as an act of creation in reality. So +1 to evil. There's our umbilical cord tied to the dark force of evil, and poop, we push in a +1 force, so evil goes up 1 notch. So everyone doing that, that's up 1 notch. There's collective karma. So you got to send it back. Send back the evil to nullify the cord that it has attached to us, that we are feeding it through upholding it, through carrying and bearing it, through creating evil. So there's the evil that's created initially through the +1 by the person, the causal agent creating it, and that gives the force of evil a +1. But the rest of us that carry and bear it and uphold the evil and don't stop it, well, that lets the evil persist. It leaves that force to persist and infect other people's minds and keep growing. Because if you don't do anything to stop evil, well, it's just going to spread through influence, and more people are going to adopt different levels of immorality and different degrees of evil and manifest it into creation. Surely we don't want to be patient forever, to bear forever, to carry forever, to suffer forever, to endure forever the evil we encounter or create ourselves. The evil we create needs to be sent back, and the knowledge of evil needs to be endured and understood in order to help others let go of their burden and release, return, and send back the evil they are carrying to no longer create it and feed it. So when you're carrying evil, you're perpetuating evil in the most direct sense. The rest of us, if we're not creating evil, well, we can still, we're bearing it, we're carrying it as a memory, as a knowledge, through compassion, sympathy, and empathy. We put ourselves as the other, and we feel as they feel. As one suffers, we all suffer. So they're the ones that send it back, no longer create it, and no longer feed it, because they're the ones generating it. So there's 2 different levels of bearing as well, to bear the evil, 2 different ways of looking at it. The patience is in carrying the knowledge, not in carrying the continued creation of evil, to continue to carry it and feed the universal force of evil through our particular manifestations. So what I'm saying is, those who create evil and carry it that way, they need to immediately stop. So us, if we're creating evil, that's why you need to face the mirror, you need to care for truth deeply, you need to go through the depth of the moral baseline as deeply as you can in objective morality, and understand objective morality as it is, and let go of yourself, detach from your attachment to yourself. You need to engage in objective detachment and look at morality not in terms of you and what you want to survive and how you want to live, but you have to look at it, get rid of yourself, and just look at truth for what it is, not in relation to you. And so when you do that, you can face evil and you can let go of it. But the other evil that is created by others that we aren't creating, that needs to be maintained and carried until we remove it, because that's just the knowledge of evil. That's the awareness of evil that we need to carry until there's no more evil. Then we don't need to carry it anymore. Make sense? If the individual evils are removed, the universal evil is terminated. Because this is also what I talked about in another article that I didn't expand upon in terms of micro evil and macro evil. Micro evil, I believe I was using it in terms of our personal evil we create, and then the macro evil would be the big force of evil that is created as a result of each of our particular manifestations of evil. Or it could also have been micro as in smaller evils, and macro as in more egregious evils. But I think the first explanation I gave was what I was talking about. So we have the particular individual, particular creations of evil that feed the dark force of evil as a universal. So it's not that it actually exists in itself, but it is an aggregate karmic force that is represented through reality by our own manifestations and what we co-create. So you can see the size of the force of evil in a way through the manifestations of evil in the world. That gives you an accurate representation of this quote, imaginary universal existence of evil. All the particular generations of evil generate the aggregate force of evil in our lives, and how we are made to suffer from it, and how we make others suffer from it because we create it or we allow it to be created, and that's the collective karma of our condition. Universals don't exist anywhere for anyone to see without the individuals manifesting them, creating them, living them, being them. So this comes back to the transcendental aspects of being. None of the universals, animal doesn't exist, cat doesn't exist, human doesn't exist. So how do we see them anywhere? Well, we don't see animal, cat, or truth, or love. We don't see that anywhere. They don't exist anywhere for anyone to see without the individuals manifesting them, creating them, living them, and being them. So you can create and be and live in the force of X, or you can create and be and live in the polarity of the force of minus X, towards that polarity or towards the positive one. You're going to create in aspects of evil. The universal existence of evil isn't seen itself. It's only seen through the manifestations of the individuals creating it. Just like truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. It's not seen anywhere. It's not anywhere. It's only seen through the manifestations of those creating it. So the minus X forces and universals only exist because, the evil force in its direct immorality and wrongs and harms, that's created by us, and it's only manifested through us. And because we have the free will to create that negative polarity. The negative polarity doesn't exist in the transcendental realm of the transcendental being, which is the universal realm of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, God, source, all one, singularity, etc. The evil is not there. That's one polarity. The evil manifests through free will agents who are capable of going against their nature, their human nature, which is the nature of the higher consciousness, as we are capable of expressing it. And as I said, animals are of a lower consciousness, so they don't have that as much of a capacity to create in the manifestation of that one polarity. And some of them have programmed aspects, for some reason or another, to be generators of immorality. But they are animals living in amorality because they do not understand the concept of morality. They cannot conceptualize it. So they can't really consciously work to align themselves with it, because it's not a conscious awareness of this concept of morality, of the transcendental being. It's not in their awareness to do it, even though some of them do break out in some respects, and as I've talked about before. So passion, suffer, endure, hurt, hurt for, passion towards, yearn towards, suffer the passion of going towards something, endure that passion. The hurt is related to a movement and impact, a ram-strike collision. Passion is a force for movement. Passion, the force for movement, good or bad, it should move you if you're feeling it. It'll move you to stop the evil if you're feeling the evil. Should. That's the point of it anyways. That's why we have emotions, to feel reality, is so that we can understand aspects of reality and drive us to correct things, to make things better. We can feel reality. Because if you're not going to feel reality, and you're not cognizant, you're not aware and thought of the evil in reality, and you're not feeling it, then you're not going to do anything about it. You don't have the passion. You're not feeling reality. Passion is a force for movement. Enduring what is true can become a force, a passion, for motivation as well. And so too can knowledge of evil existing. The knowledge of evil existing can become a force for movement. You know it exists, and then you want to do something to stop it from existing. So it moves you through your care and desire and passion to stop it. It'll move you in a direction in life, and you can actualize through your will certain actions to get rid of it. Suffering in, quote, mind and, quote, heart, with the knowledge of good and evil, and having the hard, solid, firm, steadfast composure in, quote, mind and, quote, heart, to bear, carry, suffer, and endure through it. It can hurt. That ram strike and collision force with reality can hurt. So yeah, it can hurt. It does hurt, doesn't it? Those of us who have been experiencing greater compassion, greater heart center development, greater care development, greater moral development through conscience development, and greater compassion and empathy and sympathy, well, we feel the hurt. We feel a lot more than other people. And that is what motivates us to want to stop evil, because we can feel what is in reality. We're not stuck in a positivity mask and an optimism bias, in a fear for truth and apathy for truth and morality, because we fear facing ourselves in the mirror, and fear facing the shadow demon, darkness, negative, evil, and immorality within us. So we just cast it aside and keep ignoring ourselves. We don't know who we are. That's why I've mentioned in previous articles, and there's a quote, and until you're lost, you won't find yourself. Because until you realize how lost you actually are and how much you are living a false self, so you're not living as a true self. You're not found in the true self. You're lost as a false self. So until you realize that you don't know who you are, until you realize that you're lost, well then you're never going to find yourself, because you don't even know that you're lost. As should have been clear, pathos and passion relate to suffering and enduring. Pathos also relates to calamity, which passion relates to through hurt. So in pathos, in the etymology of calamity, well, what is hurt? Hurt's a calamity. So here we go, pathos and passion, same thing. As hurt is relating a ramming, striking collision, hence calamity, which is a form of calamity. So we can see passion and pathos are related in many ways. Pathos is derived from the same meaning as passion. So passion first, and then pathos derived from that. But pathos has additional meanings specifically related to feelings and emotions, mostly of pity or sorrow. So that's why at the top, when I had compassion, and then I had sympathy and empathy, I put in brackets feeling and emotion, because it specifically refers to specific emotions like pity and sorrow in the etymology for pathos, as opposed for passion. Or I'm getting it wrong in passion. No, pathos is the one, yeah. So passion doesn't have that specifically in the etymology, but since they're both rooted in the same understanding and meaning, that they actually do mean the same thing. So here I'm going to prove it. Passion is Latin for the Greeks pathos. So it's just that when you have passion, it just comes from the Latin, and when you have pathy, well, it just comes from the Greek. But it's the same word, it's just two different languages. So they essentially are the same with minor variations. So when you think of, compassion and sympathy, it's the same thing. Because calm is together, and sim is together, and then you have passion and pathos, well, that's the same thing. When you have sympathy for someone, well, it's because you feel for them, so you have compassion for them, and then you have sympathy for them. It's the same thing. We're just talking about it in little minor variations. And then I'd say, in order to have compassion, you have to have empathy, to put yourself in their shoes in order to feel the compassion, and then you can have the sympathy. Or something like that. Anyways, they're all related. So that's the end of the article. It went on very, very long, probably twice as long as it should have been, because I elaborated on many, many, many side topics, and even went into more depth in the explanations I gave here. So I like this audio. It's very informative. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.